as example of Justinian plague, Black Death, Zika virus, and Ebola that have happened all over the world. But in Rwanda, we did not know something called lockdown, although there was, Rwanda has experienced the disease of smallpox in 1893-94, which we think may have also obliged people to be in lockdown, although the word is not pronounced. What we have realized is that all the lockdown caused by the pandemic have resulted into economic crisis and business disruptions. But though this happened before the advent of gender promotion and women empowerment, there are some lessons that we can learn from there. For example, Black Death lockdown. During that time, crops were left unharvested, and women were blamed to be the cause of that, especially widows and old women. So they could not move or make their survival activities because of this shame and the incapacity to move around. But also in Zika lockdown, which it has affected women, especially single mothers and the female-headed family, who had to shoulder both productive and reproductive roles in their families during that difficult time, and they could not actually do their business as they required. But also during Ebola, which has affected many African countries, there was an impact on women more than other people, because the GDP impact, per capita has reduced, and women counted 85% of traders in Liberia, which is also, it was seriously affected that sector of activity. And in Congo, the cross-border trade was temporarily closed, and these activities now, they are mainly populated by women. But in Rwanda, since we don't know this word lockdown, it's difficult to know what happened during a period of lockdown. And that's why we have also initiated this work to see what happens in this country. Coming to COVID-19, it was lockdown was introduced first time in China in January 2020. As a measure to control the spread of this disease. And by April in the same year, more than half of the world population were under lockdown. Rwanda also has implemented that measure from March to May. And during that time, all the non-essential business, including handcraft, were temporarily closed with that period. According to Bizoza and Sibomana, lockdown has disrupted the business worldwide, and women business have been hit the most. So the present study actually was initiated to see what happened in Rwanda, particularly on the women's businesses. And we have actually included in this, we have taken Gahaya Links as a case study. Gahaya Links is the women-owned business based in Kigali City, buying and selling products made by women in Rwanda. It trains women in various vocational activities, including weaving and tailoring, and it helps those women to initiate their business through cooperatives, which cooperatives finally become their suppliers. So this is the institution that we have chosen as a case study, and we have used resource dependence theory, according to which resource in businesses are acquired through transaction networking and the collaboration with other actors that are similar or are in field are in related field, and there is interdependence. Actually, it is why we talk about dependency. So the study had one objective, general objective, and the four specific. General objective is to examine the effect of lockdown caused by COVID-19 on women's business in Rwanda, with a specific focus on the Gahaya Links and its associated suppliers. Objective specific specific objective 1. To analyze women's experience during lockdown caused by COVID-19, to examine the extent to which the lockdown affected the hirings and associated suppliers, to investigate any received financial support to overcome the economic effect of lockdown on their business, and to make recommendations actually to support women's and girls' business to recover the adverse effect of lockdown caused by COVID-19. So in the methodology, this study was designed as a qualitative, and we used a case study of hirings. We sampled 36 participants who included 27 women and 9 key informants purposefully selected. And we have actually included 3 cooperatives located in Gasabo, Agaseke Vision, doing weaving activities, and also Abizeranye based in Kichukiro, doing tailoring, but also Kovag doing weaving activities in the Bugesera district in Eastern Province. We had actually 2 kinds of data, primary and secondary. We collected information using in this interview guide for participants and women and the key informants. We analyzed data using thematic analysis as required in qualitative studies. So let me hand over to my sister, Bernadette, to talk about the more major findings of this research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Innocent. So I just jumped to the major findings, which are based mainly on research objectives. Looking at objective number 1, which is related to women's experience during lockdown. So women indicated that their personal schedules were disturbed because they were forced to stay at home and without doing any business. So it was hard for them, and that created shock and fear of tomorrow because they were not doing anything related to business. They are not making any money. They are not gaining any income. So it was hard for them even to maintain the social relationships. Some of their partners even left because they were not making any money. They are not contributing anything at home because their businesses were shut down. So as they could not move out, socialization, networking, and planning sessions were also disrupted. So they could not meet, they could not share any experience, they could not plan. Next slide. So on the objective number 2, which is related to effects of lockdown to Gahaya links and associated suppliers, participants indicated that there was a reduced of revenues due to stoppage of business operations. There was disruption in business partnership and supply, as well as demand chain. There was fluctuation of capital and savings because they are not making any business. They are not doing anything to do with their business. So they started to use their savings and also started encroaching on their capital. So there were difficulties in servicing the loans. So those who had loans in the banks or from the saving groups, they could not service their loans. So this also, they also indicated that due to that, they could not meet the basic household needs. Then on objective 3, which is related to support received to recover from the effects of lockdown, participants indicated that they did not, by the time we carried out our research, they had not received anything to do with the recovery fund, yet the government had put in place a recovery fund. So some of participants indicated that they don't know, they have no information regarding recovery fund, and those who had information, they indicated that the criteria are high level, so they cannot meet them. So, however, it was indicated by a number of participants that there are some facilities that they were provided by external people. which was used as coping mechanisms, such as face mask. Gahaya Links was one of the companies in Rwanda that was selected to make made in Rwanda face mask. Due to that, the staff who were working on the face mask project were given travel permits. Registered cooperatives such as Kovac and Agaseche Vision, they received a grant from New Faces, New Voices. They were advocated by Gahaya Links because they are suppliers, as Dr. Innocent mentioned. They also received, the registered cooperatives also received Red Cross in-kind grant. So conclusion and link with the theory, handicraft was regarded as non-essential business. Neither Gahaya Links nor its associated suppliers were able to work during lockdown. So the acquisition of resources, which was normally done through a transaction networking and collaboration with other actors that are similar or related fields, was blocked during the lockdown. Gahaya Links could not receive any command, could not give command to her associated suppliers, which are the cooperatives that we have mentioned. So no business was carrying out. Therefore, the theory there wasn't any interdependence as per theory suggests. So because everyone was just locked at home and no business were carried out, as any other research, this research of ours has strengths and weaknesses. I start with strengths. Information was collected from the right people at the right time. Data was collected and analyzed by the researchers. Literature is reviewed, is quite relevant to the topic. So weaknesses, lockdown keeps coming and pandemic is still ongoing. Therefore, the findings are not conclusive, but indicative. Delays in data correction due to pandemic restrictions measures. So we could not correct the data at the time that we had planned to do it. And we could not even use the means to correct the data because because of pandemic's restrictions. So findings cannot allow generalization of the conclusion like any other qualitative research. So recommendations. The recommendations are addressed to different stakeholders, including women, government, and other stakeholders. So recommendation to the women to work together, learn from one another, formalize their businesses. As indicated, those who benefited from facilities, they are those businesses that are legally registered. So aim to business diversification and e-commerce, advanced banking literacy and use. To the government, revise and update the recovery fund as indicated. Now, according to our participants, none of them received yet any facilitation from recovery fund. So government is also recommended to make recovery fund more gender responsive. To other stakeholders, Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs, civil society organization, and development partners to support women in business, develop risk management strategies, and provide capacity building to women in e-commerce. Advocate for specific window for women in handicraft sector as it has been hit most. Civil society organization and private sector, women, chamber, and gender machineries to advise channel that would help women in business know the existing and accessibility of the Economic Recovery Fund. We also made recommendation to researchers so that they can also start probably where we stopped and do the research on the following. How women-owned businesses in most hit sectors are benefiting from Economic Recovery Fund, and how can women-owned businesses in the informal sector can also benefit from Recovery Fund. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, showcasing the impact of COVID-19 on women's businesses. We only have time for just one question. So if anyone has a question, please do raise your hand. I'll get a mic over to you. Got one question over here.
Thank you very much, presenters. My name is David. I have a question, and it is based on the recommendations you made to women, as in one of the recommendations you talked about to diversify their businesses. But I thought to ask a question like, if they are to diversify the business, what do you think is a long-term business they can do, mostly if this pandemic again resumes the ability to put countries at the risk of being back of being taken back to lockdown? What do you think would be that kind of a business that would serve for a long time, or maybe long-term business that they would maybe practice in, as in they can continue to earn their usual day living funds? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it has been indicated that their business is around non-essential businesses. And lockdown or COVID-19 has shown us that there are some essential businesses that can never stop, whether there is a crisis or not. So I can't think for them, but there are businesses that has been indicated, or that lockdown or COVID-19 has shown to us that are essential in any circumstances. So if I would advise these women, I would advise them to look into those businesses that can never be affected, and also think of doing e-business, because even though you are in an essential business, but if you do e-business, you can do business whether in lockdown or not. Thank you very much.
Maybe in addition to what she has been saying, e-business is okay, but also this non-essential business is also needed even during the lockdown. But I think what we mentioned here is to be maybe dynamic, to know if there is, this one is locked, how to move on with another business. So they should keep on maybe trend and how to adapt themselves to the situation. And this is choosing essential and non-essential businesses is one of the strategies that they can use. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move on to the next presentation, which will be via Zoom. So the presentation is titled Rwandan Family in the Era of Gender Equality, a scoping review on indigenous family values and the changing roles of men and women. So yeah, please tech team, if you can get the Zoom up for us, please.
Good morning, dear participants. I am Wihangana Konsore, a PhD student in the Department of Social Work at the University of Gothenburg, Sweden, and also assistant lecturer and researcher in the Department of Social Sciences at the University of Rwanda. I am happy to share with you this morning my ongoing research for my first paper for my PhD training. It is entitled Family in the Era of Gender Equality, a scoping review of the ongoing journey in East African Community partner states. A bit of the background. You already know that the East African Community was established by the treaty signed on November 30th, 1999, and entered into force on July 7th, 2000. The contracting parties at the very beginning were the Republic of Uganda, the Republic of Kenya, and the United Republic of Tanzania. Then after, the Republic of Rwanda, the Republic of Burundi, and the Republic of South Sudan joined respectively. One of the objectives of the community is to widen and deepen cooperation among the partner states in political, economic, social, and cultural fields, research and technology, as it is enshrined in Article 5, Paragraph 1 of the treaty. Then in Article 6.d, gender equality is emphasized on as one of the principles to be materialized. In 2017, the EAC Gender Equality and Equity Bill was passed, followed by the Gender Policy. So why conducting scoping review, or what are scoping review aiming at? Scoping review aim at identifying the category of existing data in a given field to clarify key concepts and related characteristics in the available literature, and to identify and analyze knowledge gaps in a chosen area, as the different authors have put it. Why conducting a scoping review in East African partner states? So the aim of this research are to understand the perceptions of men and women, or men or women, on gender and gender equality in East African community partner states. And the research questions are the following. What are the perceptions of men and or women about gender and gender equality? How does gender equality impact on men and women's everyday family lives? So the aim or the guiding motivation is to learn about how the family is impacted by gender equality and gender policies, or how the family can impact gender policy or gender equality promotion in East African community partner states. What is the existing knowledge, or what are the gaps on this? The methodology that I am following, which is the scoping review process itself. First of all, I started by identifying key research words. Then I used the SPICE and SPIDER tools of research, which help to respond to some important questions of research. Where do I conduct the research? For whom? What is the intervention? And what do I want to compare in my research? With what results to come up? So it is also important to set inclusion and exclusion criteria. For this research to be included, journals should have been published between 2000 and 2021. They must be peer-reviewed, original publications, written either in English or in French, and be qualitative in nature. Another important step to undertake is to use the library. Of course, you have the keywords, you have the research tools, you have determined the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So the next and important step is to reach out to proper databases to be able to access the right journal articles. So for this research, 4 databases from Gothenburg University were used: social sciences, gender studies, Africa bibliography, and GSTOR. The library is very important, and of course the librarians, because they help you to navigate through the different databases by offering you the hits. How do you navigate on the databases? What tools do you need to use? For example, what do we call truncation, Borenian research tools, and so on and so forth. And the whole process should be transparent, accurate, and you have to be accountable for the entire process of research. So this is a kind of summary of the keywords and the spice and the spider tools, you can see that there are similarities between both tools, but also there are differences on what is the focus. So here is the results of the research process, what we call the flow chart, how the process was carried out up to now. So there are 4 important steps. The first one is what we call identification. The second is the screening. The third is the eligibility. And the fourth is inclusion. In the identification stage, you have, of course, to be able to identify proper databases and also be able to navigate through the databases and find proper journals, articles. The records identified through the databases at the very beginning were 9,781 from the 4 databases that I mentioned before. But from also Google Scholar, I was able to find one article, interesting article. Then I proceeded with removing duplicates and kept 8,600 articles. So on that stage, I read the articles, titles, and was removing or deleting what was not falling under my research, to the point that I was able to have 115 articles or records to be screened. At this stage, I screened through reading the title and the abstract. From this, I was able to see or to keep what was peer-reviewed and published academic articles. 21 records were excluded because they were not academic articles. Some were reports, of course, interesting reports by international NGOs or other organs. To the point that I remained with 94 articles that were assessed fully for eligibility. At this stage, with my supervisor, we have set a checklist, of course, with the inclusion and exclusion criteria, as I mentioned before. And it had different columns where we should write if the journal is included, excluded, we're not sure, and comments. The journals were given a number that were corresponding to their number on the checklist, and also where the number should be corresponding to a table of all articles that we have assessed for eligibility. So numbering the different journals and the different activities that we were carrying out was easing the process. And throughout assessing the full text, I was reading on my side while the supervisor was reading on her side also, and we were filling in the checklist. And because the checklist is online, we are able to see one another's comments and inclusion or exclusion of an article and why. So it was a collaborative work, and we came up with 9 articles to be included in the research. So this is the step on which I am right now. So I will have to read systematically the 9 articles and structure my own article to be published very soon. So you may be wondering what is next, or what I have learned through this process. So I was able to see the existing publications and the knowledge gaps as far as my area of interest or my topic is concerned. So I am like questioning myself, what will be my contribution to the existing knowledge, and what will be my contribution to bridge the gaps that I have so far noticed. The findings are not yet available. At the end of the analysis exercise, I will be able to respond to those questions. And of course, I will be able to share with you the findings when we meet again next year for the presentation in a conference like this. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and your feedback is most welcome.
Thank you so much for that really great presentation. We're now going to quickly move on to a presentation on the policy paper of IFSW on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Hi, colleagues. My name is Priska Fleischlin, and I'm going to present a little presentation on the policy paper that IFSW just has adopted this year, and it's on the role of social work and the SDGs. For doing that, I'll share my screen. And here we are. So social work's possible contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Why did I write possible contribution? Because it's very different and it varies from country to country. And so it seems to be better and more appropriate to let you as social worker decide on how to best implement the SDGs. As I said, my name is Priska Fleischlin. I am the IFSW UN Commissioner. I'm also a social worker practitioner, and I'm working in Switzerland, namely in Bern. And here you have the link of the organization I work for. IFSW, the International Federation of Social Workers, is a very large organization. Actually, it has about more than 140 national associations. It contains also several commissions. One is on education, one on human rights, ethics, indigenous people, and the United Nations. The IFSW UN Commission has 22 members in 11 time zones, which is sometimes quite demanding to find a good time for everyone to meet. And here you have a picture when we had our last virtual meeting. Actually, virtual meetings are excellent for us, so we can really talk on international issues. And the next will be on the 3rd of December. We work in 6 headquarters and offices of the United Nations. On the top, you have from the left the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. In the middle, you have the headquarters in New York. And on the right, you have the headquarters in New York. At the bottom side, you have on the left side, the UN office Santiago de Chile. Then we have in the middle, the headquarters in Bangkok, the office in Bangkok. And on the right side, Karibuni, I'm sure some of you will know this one, which is the UN office and headquarters in Nairobi. Actually, IFSW is looking for 4 additional representatives in Africa. So those would represent social work in in terms of social work relevant topics. And also since in Nairobi, the headquarters of environment is located, so it would be really good to have a social worker who has a certain knowledge on the issue of environment. So if you feel that you are in a good position and you could contribute to that, your application will be most welcome. And you can send your application to me directly, and then I will talk to the relevant person. So the person should be in good standing with the National Association, and the National Association should be a member of IFSW. These are some of the conditions to become an IFSW UN Commission member. So the relevance of the SDGs for social work are just mentioned here, and IFSW really affirms and supports the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it's also clear that this is a really a specific momentum to work together to create, to foster social, economic, and ecological transformational change globally. This is quite a demanding topic and goal to reach, but IFSW underlines the important time that we are in now, and that also social work has really something to contribute to reach that goal. And it's not only that we do that alone. IFSW understands social work as a partner, and we are ready to be good partners for governments, but also for other businesses, to work together in order to really have a holistic approach and understanding to solve the issues that we have in the area we work. Just to go a little bit into details of the SDGs, so they have these 5 Ps and 3 pillars, and the 5 Ps say that every goal that we aim to work on has to have a focus on people, on planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And these 5 Ps really highlighting the important approach to not forget people, not forget the planet, and any other issue in any decision that we take, in any development that we are working on. And it's also for social workers important to have that in mind. So it is called that sometimes we work in silos. And so at the bottom side, when we have these social, ecological, and economical goals, it is said that sometimes the professions working in silos, that means that when we talk about our own profession, it can easily happen, and I face that in my own work as well, that I'm working with social workers and colleagues, and then also from other departments, we are working on the same issues, and then of course we easily understand each other well and the focus that we have. But to be honest, sometimes we lose a bit the wider perspective, and therefore it is really critical to have also some other professions and people involved to talk together, to create solutions together. For instance, when we have a new law that is now on the policy agenda, so that we really work in my case with farmers or with entrepreneurs, or also with the government, the people who are working for the government, working together in order to understand the new law and really contributing in an effective way. And here, when we have these social, ecological, and economical goals, these are the 17 goals split into the 3 main topics. And it means that we always have to have all the 3 themes involved. And that, to be honest, for social workers, sometimes we also might not think enough on other topics. So it's really to remember ourselves that we have to keep an eye on the holistic approach, leaving no one behind. I think some of you have heard that already. And it's said that the social work profession is really a key profession to raising awareness on those people, often forgotten, often invisible. I'm thinking of all the people in rural areas, especially rural areas are often forgotten. So we have to have them in mind. So we have to visit them and maybe also to collect data in order to show the numbers, the amount of problems and issues and also possible solutions, best practice that we see in various places. But of course, also we have a very large problem in gender balance, but also in terms of certain structure of people who are living in higher prosperity, having more chances than those people in lower income areas. The policy paper, it has been built in a 3-year process. So it was actually in Geneva on the bottom side where I started to work on it. And then on the right side, you have the New York area where we could further develop on it. And then it was presented on the last global conference. Afterwards, we got some feedbacks from the National Association and we worked on it. And so we took it back. And then the renewed policy paper went to the global board, who agreed just this March on having a policy paper on social work and the SDGs. We allowed ourselves to define sustainability, development, and goals for ourselves, because it's important that social work has its own language. And that we also link the SDGs with the knowledge and the papers that we have already. Therefore, sustainability is understood in social work language as a long-term solution for the well-being of the entire ecosystem, including humans and nature for current and future generations. And so when we work with people, with communities, that means also not only focusing on the issue and the topic right now, but also thinking about the long-term impact. So working especially with the people in need, it means really to consider the steps that might happen. And sometimes we have at the end some various forms and variation that could happen. So for instance, if I do this step or work on with the people on this issue, it can happen, or another option might happen. And with this, we create a long-term development and thinking. And it's not only about the people, but also the ecosystem, which is quite demanding actually to really consider all these issues, but it growth development. That was really an important discussion to understand development in terms of economical development. So social work decide to understand development the best for people, the whole society. Peace and planet must be the focus on all activities. And you might remember the 5 Ps we have had. So we have people, peace, and planet. And also the profit should not be available for just a few people, but rather having a majority of people who really profit and not actually suffering from the rich people. Development is a dynamic, all-inclusive process of change within a person, group, or society. And this is really important, that a change, a development begins within a person, and then it goes to a group, and then it goes to society. goals for social work, we already have a certain amount of goals and also basic documents. So our social work approach mainly creates goals in participatory manner from the bottom up, including the knowledge and the needs from people, leaving no one behind, as mentioned. Of course, you know, the definition of social work and the ethical principle and many more documents that we have. So when we talk about goals created on local level, we always have to consider those basic criteria. How to work with the SDGs. So sometimes people tend to just choose certain goals and referring to them and saying that, hey, listen, we are working on goal 1. And on goal 1, we are doing this, this, and this activity. And then some other might mention goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. And so they highlight their activities. But to be honest, from our side, this is not really how the SDGs should be understood, because this is actually one agenda, and it's meant that we have to have all goals in mind. So when we create certain topics and ideas and goals, we really have to go through all those goals and considering them, seeing what we can do for really reaching all those goals. So it might be the case that you're working with a community in the rural area and you see that you have to work on quality education goal 4. So you create a program maybe with your NGO or with the government on expanding on education. But then you might also realize that goal 5 might be important, so to have a gender balanced teacher class. But then you realize that 6, clear water and sanitation for the school is really important. Otherwise, you know, good sanitation service. But then, of course, all those who are working there, they need to have a good working condition. Otherwise, they would might be in a risk for corruption and other ideas. So you end up on goal 8. And then reducing inequalities, goal number 10, is also important on a rural area, and really having a certain balance and having an equality provided. And then, of course, you can go with that through all those topics and see the specific targets, check them and see how you can reach them. And with that, you get really a holistic approach for the SDGs. And so when the more goals actually you go through, the better for the SDGs. And this one here are some approach that the policy paper mentions. So it says that we want to have on the left a partnership, you know, that we work together. And bottom up is that we create the knowledge and we bring the knowledge from the communities, from the people together. And also working together with other social workers and other areas in order to bring the whole knowledge together in order to really reach out to the governments. And also the visibility is critical. So that means why not to writing down the numbers of populace of people we work for, of all the people who need services, and bring that all together in order to really have more visibility, saying that, hey, see, in these areas, we have this amount of certain problems. And so the United Nations always somehow have a problem of not having enough data available. In this policy paper, you would also see a certain calls for all of us, actually. We should really address the opportunities and the gaps concerning the implementation of the UN SDGs. So we can also draw the attention on the implementation that should be made by the government. And so if we see certain gaps, why not to highlight that? It depends really on the region and the country and the security aspects that you face in the work. And we recognize ourselves as agent of change. I found that really good also for my work, that we are really allowed also to work towards the change that we see is necessary, that we hear from the people, so that we really work on that. To a certain need for climate justice that is affecting the people we work with. So climate justice is something that the more we talk about, the more we learn how important it is, as everyone is concerned about. And often we see that those people who are contributed the last for this climate change are those who are suffering the most, from floods, from many natural catastrophes. And there are also those people who can do the least, they can't change the system that well. So that is really a problem. And so we should working on that and creating a stronger social work perspective. Actually, with the UN headquarters on environment, it would be really good to have a social worker who is representing our profession to the UN environment in Nairobi. We do invite global, national, and local governments to build strong partnership. We advocate for social services and promote a strong and skilled social work profession. It is important to have a good social work profession, that we work together and also extend our knowledge. We integrate into social work education, schools and training, the social protection system and the SDGs. So here, talking about the SDGs and creating a certain language, working with the students on that, can also expand our own knowledge and helping them to better understand the SDGs. IFSW also supports its members to contribute to a critical analysis of power relation and to actively contribute to further agendas and policies. So being critical on power relation is helpful for better understanding the interlinkage of those who are working together and seeing how decisions have been made and where the power is located. Here are some links. If you want to have the policy paper, you will find that on the website ifsw.org. And then there's another website, local2030.org, and they provide a lot of links and ideas on how to best implement the SDGs. Also, you'll find my contact here, which is the email address. And thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you really can enjoy the conference. Looking forward to see some social work colleagues in any other occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that really great presentation. We're now going to move on, and I'm going to call on Charles to come up and kind of continue some of the discussions from yesterday on Indigenous developments. So please, Charles, if you could come up.
Good morning. I first of all want to appreciate all presenters who presented on indigenous practices. Our panel was very short, so we did not exhaust the major part on what should be done. I think all people were giving their understanding what their views on what should be done. I think we can, all of us agree that it's really very important to go back to our roots, to go back to our practices. Actually, it's not only going back, but as if you remember, during my presentation, I said in a very, very many parts of the world, people are using these practices which are not recognized by actually us who scholars, academicians. We are coming from different parts of the region, and those from the UK, but we can all of us agree or confess that some of these indigenous practices are still there and they are still relevant to solving people's needs and problems. So I think not to talk too much. You have heard a lot from the indigenous knowledge and the practices. Now I would open the discussion to the floor to give your views on what should be done to strengthen this kind of practice. Actually, on my mind, like in the Rwandan context, happy colleagues are here, and very soon we are reviewing our curriculum. We wanted to put a full module of 20 credits on indigenous knowledge, because in Rwanda we have Muganda, we have Mugorova, we have so many others that can be taught in that big module, so that we at least address that issue. So the floor is yours. Please, you can give your comments and thoughts.
Thank you for that, Charles. I just want to give a bit of a student perspective, because I think in the panel we talked about the academic and the practitioner perspective. So I think from a student perspective, I think from my own knowledge, and then also throughout the New Social Workers Project across Europe, a lot of new social workers feel that it's very difficult to link theory to practice. And I think the difficulty in linking theory to practice is when we aren't taught about Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous theories. So I think it's very, very good to hear that a module on just Indigenous knowledge is going to be kind of looked at and developed. I think that would be amazing. And I think that's needed globally, because globally, I would say the lack of understanding of Indigenous knowledge is a global issue. So in the UK, we have a wide diversity in terms of ethnicity and race. And there's a lot of research to say that social work intervention with like racially minoritized families and diverse families is not good enough. And I think some of the answers there would be looking at Indigenous knowledge and some of the practices that I've been hearing and listening and seeing throughout my time in Rwanda. So yeah, thank you.
I think that's very important. And actually, every society has a culture. I was privileged that I traveled to different parts of the world. But you find people making like a juice from the traditional trees, flowers. And some people actually are using herbs to treat some diseases. As I told you, I'm the commissioner for Indigenous Commission in IFSW Africa. But really, when we are even discussing among ourselves, because around 5 or 6 regions are presented, but each region have their own needs, which should not be general, as even our particular countries have their practices and needs. Maybe what works in Rwanda might not work in Zambia or Malawi or Mozambique and so on. But do we really consider that important in our communities, in our practices? Because when we separate our culture, and those indigenous practices, which I said are still today relevant in our communities, and ignore them, it would be difficult to attain those goals and the quick. But did I?
Yeah.
the importance of those practices that we are sometimes tended to ignore and undermine, considering them primitive or not much relevant. But it is the problem is among us, the educated ones. But when you talk to community members, they will tell you, because when they have a problem, actually they don't go directly to the leadership. They first talk to friends. They first talk to family members. And some of these problems actually are solved at that small level of meeting a friend. I have a problem. To be marital, child-parents relationship, or even a community members relationship. So when community members come and they sit together, they find a solution before even calling a social worker or any other profession. So I think we have to give it really more importance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairs. I just want to ask this question on how practical is the indigenous practice, because I'm trying to refer to a situation that happened to a country like a year ago when like COVID was at its peak, very serious. Our president, the late John Pombe Magufuli, tried to introduce this indigenous practice, as in he encouraged people to use the herbs, he encouraged people to use the African local ways to try to overcome the whole challenge of the COVID pandemic. But in the global perspective, I think this wasn't something that people appreciated. So I'm trying to wonder, does really IFSW recognize and encourage the indigenous practice, and how practical is it? Thank you.
My take on that actually is what we said. We tend to believe that the laboratory prepared medication is the best. But when you look at different communities, more especially the Asians, they use herbs. They eat a lot of garlic. And the garlic, when you read it, it's like an antibiotic, which has less effect. Ginger, all of us, we are all people who are educated, you Google it. There are some research that are carried out on the importance of those grown fruits or some herbs. I will not say that it's yes, it is true or not, but all of us, we can read and see the importance. But those who are fighting, of course, it's the capitalism. I wanted to sell my medicine. Why should people quit? And I remember when I was growing up, I rarely took these modern medications. When I feel bad in my stomach, my mother would go in a bush, bring some herbs, cook them, or mingle them with other things. They give, I take, and I was feeling better after some times. I remember when I got this cough that breaks even the voice. I just got milk cooked with another herb. They gave me, after 2 days, I was fine. So growing in that traditional kind of life, myself, from my own experience, I can confess that many of these herbs did solve the problem. So all of us, we can give our own experiences, but those experiences needed to be researched about, needed to be documented, so that they are shared with some scientific proofs. I think that's the biggest challenge is that one, which many presenters talked about. What is there, not documented, not researched about, because we don't know the effect. They say, how much do you take? But if such knowledge is researched about, it can still be relevant because you have a scientific backup to justify the importance. I think that's what is mostly lacking. Thank you so much. I'm told time is over. As we get time, we'll be embarking on the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that really good discussion on Indigenous knowledge. I think it's really important that we continue these discussions, and we're going to continue them in this next presentation titled Establishing the Relevance of Ubuntu in Social Work, a Human Rights Perspective. I think this will be on Zoom.
Delegates of conference, allow me to present the presentation to IFSW Africa Conference 2021 in Rwanda, with the theme Establishing the Relevance of Ubuntu in Social Work, a Human Rights Perspective, by Robert Kudakwashi Chigangaidze from Midland State University and Cornelius Udzai from Great Zimbabwe University. Delegates of conference, Ubuntu Botho or UNU, as you might all know, is guided by the axiom, a person is a person through other persons. Umuntu ngubuntu ngabantu. Ubuntu is an African philosophy which is embedded on generic life values of responsibility, justice, helpfulness, community, caring, dependability, sharing trust, love, reciprocity, equality, and social change. Ubuntu is an African worldview that brings the human face to every aspect of life. And when it is applied to social work, Ubuntu means humane social work using human methods to achieve human goals. Ubuntu is a fundamental value of social work practice in African countries such as Zimbabwe. Also, the African philosophy of Ubuntu relates to the moral qualities of a person, in particular characteristics such as gentleness, generosity, empathy, and forgiveness. Human rights are about entitlements of persons with respect to upholding of social justice. These are centered on equality, freedom, and solidarity. As human rights, they can be conceptualized as ideals, enactments, as well as being exercised. By ideals, we refer to those goals that society view as important to meet individual and community needs. As enactments, we mean that these ideals are codified into documents, usually legal instruments and constitutions. And when we say rights are exercised, we say rights are put in practice. Rights are put in action. So as Ubuntu is put in action to address human need and as well as community needs. We'll move to the human right to life, which I see as valuable in social work. Ubuntu knows that one should choose life over wealth. Essentially, at the heart of Ubuntu is survival, which is described as the ability to live and exist in spite of difficult circumstances. Solidarity through Ubuntu is what helps sustain life during climate change disasters. For example, families donating food and clothing for cyclone-inflicted communities. Among the asserted values of Ubuntu is the commandment to respect human life, and it is taboo or unheard of to spill human blood in Ubuntu. When we consider the human right to the enjoyment and highest attainable standard of health, the African philosophy of Ubuntu promotes holistic assessments in clinical social work. It appreciates the multimodal causality of diseases, which also involve environmental and spiritual causes to illness. Thus, this philosophy considers the spiritual causes of diseases. It is holistic in explaining etiology of diseases. Ubuntu promotes positive mental health through its values of connectedness, competency, consciousness, and the respect of human dignity. Again, Ubuntu promotes forgiveness, which arguably is essential in health promotion activities. They are calls to adopt the African philosophy as a framework in the fight against epidemics and pandemics such as COVID-19. In view of these arguments, one can argue that Ubuntu can help advance the realization of the highest attainable standard of health as a human right in social work practice. Human rights to safe and clean water and sanitation. The African viewpoint of Ubuntu emphasizes everyone's responsibility to the care of water as a communal resource system. From a traditional viewpoint, water is essential for domestic use and agricultural purposes. It is a source of life, food, and energy. Therefore, respecting water addresses other human rights, such as the human right to life, the human right to development as well. Water is also utilized in the African spiritual practices that involve communing with the ancestors. Hence, it is regarded as sacred. In Ubuntu, ladies and gentlemen, water can be given to a traveler or a stranger to help him cool down and as a sign of respecting human dignity. Ubuntu values the human right to adequate food and nutrition, which is a pivotal element to social work practice because it ensures elements of food security that are central to social development, social policy formulation, health, as well as prevention of diseases. Ubuntu kudla or kujga, meaning that for one to exhibit Ubuntu, the person should have eaten. It means food gives and restores human dignity. Ubuntu involves giving strangers food or travelers food and entertaining them to show respect of their human dignity. Food generosity values are central to the philosophy of Ubuntu. Ubuntu promotes food production activities such as Nimbe, Zundera Mambo in Zimbabwe, Letsema in South Africa, that ensure food security in times of droughts and other climate change related disasters. Social work is well known for intervening in those particular areas where there are interactions within systems, interactions between people to enhance well-being. Social work can also intervene in food production services where systems interrelate for the enhancement of the welfare of humanity. Delegates of conference, the human right to safe, clean, and sustainable environment is an essential element to the African philosophy of Ubuntu. Why? The environment is seen as the habitat of God and our ancestors. Hence, it has to be protected. Ubuntu can help advance eco-spiritual social work. For those of you who have listened and we have read the work of Van Breda, it speaks volumes in terms of how Ubuntu advances eco-spiritual social work. Ubuntu provides a theoretical framework for environmental sustainability through the concepts of ukama, relatedness, taboos, and totems. Again, in Ubuntu, the custom is to leave the environment for future generations in a more improved state than a deteriorated one. The environment is an important element in social work practice because it is a source of life, a source of energy, a source of rejuvenation, a source of the enhancement of welfare. Thus, it is pivotal to address such a human entitlement within the profession of social work. And Ubuntu provides the philosophical background through which we can attain knowledge in this advancement. It will be injustice not to address the human right to development. Ubuntu promotes social development in that it connects us to the unborn generation and our responsibility to ensure that they have good well-being. Ubuntu advances notions of eradicating poverty through the values of peace, community building, dialogue, collective responsibility, and human rights. Ubuntu can be used as a concept of working with people to co-produce social development. All the human rights discussed in this presentation are essential elements to the human right of development. One, we need to respect the human life so as to ensure that there's preservation of life for there to be development. Ubuntu have proven to be essential in advancing the human right to life. So in the same manner, it has also proved to be vital in addressing the human right to sustainable environment. Again, Ubuntu has proven essential in addressing the human right to the highest attainable standard of health, to mention but a few. Thus, all these human rights are pivotal in social work. And one can argue that Ubuntu is knowledgeable, provides indigenous knowledge systems on how we can address human rights through social work practice. Delegates of this conference, as we conclude, it is important that we note that human rights are secondary to Ubuntu, but human dignity is primary. Human dignity is at the epicenter of social work, Ubuntu, and human rights. Again, Ubuntu and human rights are also values of social work practice. Ubuntu as an African philosophy promotes human rights in the same manner that human rights also promote the spirit of Ubuntu. The view of respecting life in its totality, including the spirituality of life and the human dignity through enhancing food security, development, environmental sustainability, health, and access to water is inherent in Ubuntu. Social workers can tap into this African worldview in promoting human rights. The philosophy is applicable in several entitlements beyond those in this presentation. As we conclude, let us also know that Ubuntu is not only limited to human rights, but Ubuntu can expand its knowledge system to address the rights of nature, the rights of the Mother Earth, the rights of environment, that which is central also to the issues that social work can address beyond this scope. Thank you.
Thank you for that great presentation. We're now going to move on to the last presentation before the break. Okay.
Sorry for the interruption. The next presenter is not available. We call upon Jongman. Jongman, are you listening to us? Can you share? Jongman from Botswana. Dr. Jongman, can you hear us? Mayaka, can you link us with Jongman?
Well, Emmanuel, thank you. I think the best would be to go to questions. I can see Robert is still present. Jongman is having some technicalities, I believe.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Hello, there we go. Thank you for that, Mayaka. So we'll go to questions then to Robert about the relevance of Ubuntu and kind of merging those ideas with the human rights perspective. So I imagine that Robert is in the Zoom. So if anyone has any questions, please. One question here.
Yes, Hambi Mustafa, the National President of Nigeria Association of Social Workers. Ubuntu is all about a better future for humanity, a future in which the need of which is responsibility of all. In it, we are talking of we feelings, togetherness, collectivity, and the fair and socially just society. But not fully, the continent of Africa is riddled with poverty. There's poverty in Africa, African poverty. And when we are talking of fairly just society, is a continent a just society? And how can we the Ubuntu philosophy succeed in an atmosphere of lack of poverty, good governance, accountability, high-tech corruption, when the social workers are also victims of this injustice. So in essence, how can we promote philosophy of Ubuntu as beautiful as it is in a very unjust society? How will the philosophy grow in this glaring and conspicuous unjust society? So what will be the take? Is Ubuntu going to be a mere rhetoric and good presentation? And how do we go prepare for the grand action? I think this question and others must be properly addressed. There are questions to be asked on the concept of philosophy of Ubuntu and answers to them. And we must think of providing answers to these systemic issues, particularly common in our continent of Africa.
Wow, yeah, really, really great question. Robert, would you like to answer that question?
Thank you so much for that question. I would love to say Ubuntu can bring us back to African pan-nationalism, where we say we go back to Julius Nyerere's call for Africa to be united. We go to Prof. Lumumba's dream of a united Africa that is one currency, in solidarity to fight oppression, in solidarity to fight social injustice. It is not a one-person vision, but it requires unity amongst social workers. It requires integration, sharing of knowledge, as well as taking it upon ourselves that we are doing it in a holistic manner without leaving anyone, be it a student, be it practitioners, be it academics. Fighting together is key, as Ubuntu calls for our oneness in doing things, thinking of the brother, the sister, so as to ensure that we leave no one in fighting injustice. Thank you.
Great response. Thank you so much for that, Robert. Does anyone else have a question? We've got one at the front.
Thank you very much. My name is David. Great thanks to the presenter. I have a question, and my question is somehow wider, but I will be brief and precise. Actually, I recognize the philosophy of Ubuntu as an African, but actually, I have two things. It's like an advice, but again, it will result into a question. There are two things. Actually, to implement elements of Ubuntu, Africans, we need to be realistic, not ideological. That's one. Why? SDGs, as well as they are concerned, they are sustainable development goals, and they are viewed in different dimensions: poverty reduction, promotion of health, education, and so on. But actually, if we come back to the context, to the concept of Ubuntu and the indigenization of its elements, it means we Africans, we are still indigenous based. We have such kind of indigenous based activities and ideas, to be realistic. But if we really seem like we want to indigenize more these elements of Ubuntu, how shall we succeed with SDGs? And my suggestion is, my question is, do you think really we have to prioritize what we have to indigenize in effort to achieve these SDGs? Take an example. If we want to indigenize the element of Ubuntu as in achieving sustainable health, do you think we shall not put back to these Africans to be using these kind of hubs, and yet we need to promote health? And the fact is, we eliminated the use of hubs because we were modernized somehow to use this kind of biomedical hubs, kind of, if I'm not mistaken. So if we are to prioritize what we have to indigenize, what do you think are those, and what are the approaches to indigenize so that we should achieve that we should achieve long-term sustainable goals of Africa, not forgetting that we are coping up with the West. Thank you.
Great question. Robert, can you please share your thoughts?
Thank you. Ubuntu is about also technological development, embracing that which is important for the enhancement of humanity. Ubuntu is an African spirit that encompasses the advancement of human life. It promotes human life advancement. In that, I should say, Ubuntu gathers technologies that advance human life, that are important for community development. If a technology is important for any human development, it advances Ubuntu. But if technology destroys the essence of life, it becomes anti-Ubuntu. Therefore, Ubuntu calls for the integration of either any form of knowledge, any form of technology, advancing survival, advancing the welfare of humanity, and humanity in its holistic nature. That is the spiritual element, the physical element, also the environmental and spiritual elements as well. So whatever advances these elements is within the framework and scope of Ubuntu philosophy. And it calls for sharing of knowledge, as I've said before, and also not doing away with Western theories, but incorporating them to advance humanity. I thank you.
Thank you so much for those responses, Robert, and a great presentation. So we're now going to move on to the tea break, starting now, and then if we could all be back here for just before 10:30, where we'll be starting the rest of the conference. So thank you so much. Enjoy your tea break.